Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in your testimony, you said, in response to a medical marijuana question, we have a substance abuse problem and we don't want to add to it. Is it the position of the DEA that democratizing access to medical marijuana will add to the substance abuse problem in this country?
I think it's a conversation that we have to have. Again, when you say medical marijuana, is it medicine that has been made from marijuana, or the current standard of a state has now said that marijuana is medicine?
Well, in either of those circumstances. But let's just take the circumstance where a state has said marijuana is medicine. Is it your view that that adds to the substance abuse problem?
It is.
Opioids are prescribed principally as a chronic pain solution, right?
Correct.
The National Academy of Sciences issued a report in 2017 entitled The Health Effects of Cannabis and Cannabinoids. Are you familiar with that work product?
No, sir.
I'll quote from it. It says, there is conclusive or substantial evidence that cannabis or cannabinoids are effective for treatment of chronic pain in adults. Do you have any basis scientifically or from any evidentiary standpoint to disagree with that conclusion?
Again, this is why I think we always talk about the research of the benefits of marijuana.
So you support research into medical marijuana?
We've said that all along, that we support the research of marijuana.
And after you implemented a rule in August of 2016 pushing the Department of Justice to create more research-based cannabis, they haven't issued any more of those permits, have they? Or haven't granted any?
So they haven't been granted, but I think there's an important distinction that has to be understood. So when we put that rule out, it was in the efforts to help the research community.
But if none of the research permits have been granted, how has it helped them?
Because there is an issue with how we put that solicitation out, or that rule out. And that has to do with the single treaty, which I know, look, I had to get up to speed on it. I didn't understand it at first when I was told. But the reality is that the department has worked through this. Once they've made their ruling, DEA will figure out how this looks moving forward.
But you've taken the position that medical cannabis, in response to my questions, adds to the problem. And so you've also agreed that opioids are prescribed for chronic pain, so I want to use my remaining time to delve into the extent to which medical cannabis in some places has been used as an appropriate substitute. The Minnesota Department of Health had a research project with over 2,000 patients who had intractable pain that used medical cannabis. And those patients saw opioids prescribed at a rate 38% less than people who were not using medical cannabis. Do you have any basis with which to disagree with that finding, that those patients saw a reduction in the need for opioids when they had access to medical cannabis?
So I'm not familiar with that study. I think there are a number of studies out there that talk when people are presented, whether I guess it would be with medical marijuana or with Tylenol or others, that there are many alternatives to opioids. And again, I'd be happy to... Do you
acknowledge then that medical marijuana is an alternative to opioids?
No, I'm saying I don't know that study, so I mean...
Okay, what studies show that medical marijuana would increase the use of opioids? Are there any?
I don't know.
So you're the acting administrator of the DEA. You cannot cite a single study that indicates that medical marijuana creates a greater challenge with opioids, and you're unaware of the studies, including studies from the National Academy of Sciences, that demonstrate that medical marijuana can be an acceptable alternative to opioids. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
The American Geriatric Society surveyed patients and they found a 68% reduction in opioid use. Are you familiar with that?
No, sir.
In New Mexico, medical cannabis patients saw a 70% reduction not only in opioids, but in all scheduled drugs. Is that something you're familiar with?
No, sir.
So the sum of evidence from the states that have democratized access to medical cannabis, have you analyzed any data that looks at opioid death rates in medical cannabis states versus non-medical cannabis states?
No, sir.
Does that strike you? I mean, you indicated earlier, and I'm grateful for it, that that's an appropriate conversation to have. I wanted to take my last few moments to thank Chairman Goodlatte. He has signed on as a co-sponsor to the Medical Cannabis Research Act, which I think builds on the work of the DEA to push the Department of Justice to stop their obstruction when it comes to researching medical cannabis. Can we count on the DEA to be a partner in pushing for more research so that we can either validate or dismiss this information we're receiving from states?
And I think we've been consistent in that message for the last number of years.
Thank you, Mr.